His lawyer leaned in and whispered 5 words, just 5. And Vincent's face, that smug, self-satisfied face I'd stared at across the breakfast table for 15 years, went completely white. His hands started trembling. The papers he'd been so eager to sign were shaking like leaves in a storm. And me? For the first time in 3 years, I smiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how we got here. How a woman everyone thought had lost her mind actually played the longest, most patient game of her life. My name is Alexis Dunst. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to Vincent Mercer. 15 years of marriage. That's longer than most Hollywood relationships, longer than some small countries have existed, and definitely longer than my patience should have lasted. But I'm a stubborn woman. I get it from my grandmother. I met Vincent when I was 17. I'd graduated high school early, not because I was some genius, but because I was practical and motivated and really, really wanted to get out of my parents' house. I got a job at Henderson and Price Law Firm as a file clerk. Minimum wage, maximum paper cuts, but it was mine. By 18, I'd worked my way up to legal assistant. I was good with details, good with numbers, good with keeping my mouth shut and my eyes open. Vincent was 24 when we met at a client event. Charming, ambitious, full of dreams about building a real estate empire. He talked about the future like it was already his, like success was just waiting for him to show up and claim it. He said he was going to build something incredible. I said I'd help him file the paperwork. Romance, right? We got married when I was 19. Tyler came along when I was 20. I kept working at the law firm part-time while raising our son, building up my 401k, saving every spare dollar. My grandmother always said a woman should have her own money, not secret money, she'd clarify. Just her own, something nobody could take. At 23, Vincent's business finally took off. He asked me to quit the law firm and help him full-time. He needed someone to manage the books, handle clients, coordinate with contractors, someone he could trust completely. So I became his unpaid everything. Bookkeeper, office manager, client liaison, interior decorator for model homes, marketing coordinator, event planner. I did it all while raising Tyler, managing our household, and somehow keeping everyone fed and reasonably happy. My official title was wife. My unofficial title was everything else. For 11 years, I poured myself into building Vincent's dream. And for 11 years, he got the credit, the awards, the recognition. At every industry event, I was Vincent's wife. At every celebration, he thanked his team, his mentors, his vision. But somehow never quite got around to thanking me. Somewhere along the way, things shifted. He started making decisions without consulting me. Started staying late for work more and more often. Started criticizing little things, the way I dressed, the meals I cooked, my lack of ambition. I was running his entire back office for free while raising his son and keeping his life organized. But sure, not ambitious enough. Then, 3 months ago, he dropped the bomb. He came home on a Tuesday evening. I was making dinner, his favorite, actually, because I'm apparently a glutton for unappreciated effort. He sat me down at the kitchen table with this look on his face, not sad, not apologetic, just businesslike. "I want a divorce," he said. And then, "I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. You can keep Tyler." He said it like he was ordering from a menu. "I'll have the assets. Hold the child, thanks. Keep Tyler?" Like our 15-year-old son was a leftover pizza? Like he was an inconvenience being graciously allowed to stay with me? I just stared at him. 15 years of marriage. And this was how it ended, at our kitchen table, between the salt shaker and the butter dish, like I was just another item he was discarding. What I didn't know in that moment, what I wouldn't find out until later, was that Vincent had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer, Harold Whitfield, expensive and experienced. He'd been building his exit strategy while I was meal prepping and scheduling his dentist appointments. I'd been blindsided by a man I'd trusted with everything. The next day, his mother showed up, Lorraine Mercer, a woman who had treated me like the help for 15 years, arrived with her perfectly styled hair and her perfectly practiced sympathy face. She patted my hand and told me I should have tried harder to keep him happy. "Men have needs, dear," she said. like she was explaining something complicated to a slow child. Lorraine's advice on marriage was always fascinating, considering her husband spent 7 days a week on the golf course specifically to avoid being in the same room as her. But sure, I was the problem. That first week was a blur. Vincent moved me to the guest room. He had documents drawn up, settlements proposed, timelines established. Everything was moving so fast, and I felt like I was drowning. Everyone saw a woman whose world had just collapsed, a wife being thrown away after 15 years of service, a victim who didn't see it coming. But here's the thing. What Vincent didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd found something 3 years ago, something buried in his own financial records, something he thought was hidden forever. And I'd been quietly, patiently preparing ever since. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment. Thank you. Back to the disaster. Within a week of the announcement, Vincent had completely taken control. The guest room became my permanent residence in what used to be our home. My closet shrank from a walk-in to 2 small sections he graciously allowed me to keep. The message was clear. This isn't your house anymore. Within 2 weeks, he started bringing her around. Brittany Sawyer, 27 years old, worked at his company. Of course she did. She had that Instagram perfect look. Blonde highlights, perfect nails, yoga pants that cost more than my weekly groceries. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it, wore my apron, my grandmother's apron, while making smoothies in my blender. She was younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but she made amazing smoothies, so I guess that's something. Vincent paraded her around like a trophy. They'd sit on my couch, watch my television, eat off my plates. He'd put his arm around her right in front of me, like I was furniture, like I'd already disappeared. The humiliation escalated daily. First, he canceled my personal credit card. We need to separate finances, he said, like he was being reasonable. Then the joint card. Then he suggested I should probably find somewhere else to stay while we sorted things out. My own home, and I was being asked to leave. Lorraine came over to help me pack. And by help, I mean she went through my belongings and decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes, fine. Family photos, some of them. My grandmother's recipe box? She hesitated on that one, like she was considering claiming it for herself. What I was not allowed to take. Any jewelry Vincent had bought me over 15 years. Any furniture I'd picked out. Anything of value. Those were marital assets, Lorraine explained, and Vincent was entitled to them. She packed my things in garbage bags. Not boxes, garbage bags. Like I was trash being taken out. Through all of this, I had one person I thought I could trust, Diane Holloway. We'd been friends since high school. 20 years of friendship, through boyfriends and breakups and babies and everything in between. She was the first person I called after Vincent's announcement. She was so supportive, always checking in, always asking how I was holding up, always ready to listen. She'd come over with wine and let me cry on her shoulder. She told me I deserved better. She told me Vincent was making a huge mistake. But something felt off. Little things at first. Vincent seemed to know my plans before I made them. When I mentioned to Diane that I was thinking about fighting for the house, Tyler came home the next day saying Dad told him it wouldn't work. When I told Diane I was looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, Vincent made a comment about that exact area being too expensive for me. Then it clicked. Looking back, I should have seen it years ago. The way Diane always lit up when Vincent walked into the room. The way she'd compliment him just a little too much, laugh at his jokes just a little too hard. She always asked about him first whenever we talked. How's Vincent? How's the business? Is Vincent happy? She'd been carrying a torch for my husband for 15 years. And Vincent, because he collected admirers like some people collect stamps, knew exactly how to use it. He made her feel special, important, not like other women. He probably implied they'd get together after the divorce, gave her just enough hope to keep her loyal. My best friend was his spy. 20 years of friendship sold out for some flirting and empty promises. At least charge more, Diane. But the worst part wasn't Vincent, wasn't Lorraine, wasn't even Diane. The worst part was Tyler. My son saw everything. The girlfriend, the grandmother packing my bags, The way his father looked at me like I was nothing, and Vincent was working on him, dripping poison in his ear day after day. Your mom is making this difficult. I just want everyone to be happy. She's the one dragging this out. I'm trying to be fair, but she won't cooperate. Tyler started pulling away from me. Not angry, exactly, just distant, confused. He didn't know who to believe, and his father was very, very convincing. I could lose the house, I could lose the money, I could lose everything I'd spent 15 years building. But watching my son look at me like I was the problem, that was the knife. That was the wound that actually bled. I hired a lawyer. Nina Castellano, recommended by my old firm. 52 years old, sharp as a razor, absolutely no tolerance for nonsense. She reviewed my situation and laid out the battle plan. You helped build this business, she said. You're entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We fight. I looked at her for a long moment. What if I don't want to fight? Nina stared at me like I'd started speaking another language, like I'd suggested we send Vincent a thank you card and a fruit basket. She thought I was broken, depressed, too beaten down to stand up for myself. She had no idea. I moved into a small apartment with Tyler, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of my old pantry. Half our boxes didn't even fit. They sat stacked in the corner of Tyler's room, like a monument to how far we'd fallen. Meanwhile, Vincent posted photos with Brittany. New chapter, new energy, blessed, he wrote. Lorraine commented underneath, so happy for you, sweetheart. You deserve joy. My sister called, furious. You need a shark lawyer. Take him for everything he's worth. Everyone had advice. Everyone thought they knew what I should do. Everyone saw a woman who'd given up, who couldn't fight, who was letting her husband walk all over her. Everyone was wrong. Here's the thing about being underestimated. People stop watching you. They stop being careful around you. They stop guarding their secrets. And that's exactly when you learn everything you need to know. 3 years. That's how long I'd been carrying this secret. That's how long I'd known the truth about Vincent Mercer and his glittering, glamorous, completely fake empire. It started on a random Tuesday night, 3 years before the divorce. Vincent was working late again. He was always working late by then, though I didn't yet know what that really meant. I was going through the company books, reconciling accounts, doing the unglamorous work that kept his business running. And I found something strange. A transfer to an account I didn't recognize, then another, then a pattern. Money flowing out of our accounts into places I'd never seen before. I dug deeper. I stayed up until 3 a.m, following the trail. What I found made my blood run cold. Vincent had been taking loans against everything we owned. The house, our beautiful house that everyone admired, had 3 mortgages on it. The original loan of $400,000, a second mortgage of $350,000 taken out 4 years ago, a third mortgage of another $350,000 taken out 2 years ago. Total owed $1.1 million. Actual value of the house, $850,000. We were underwater by $250,000 on a home I thought we owned outright. The business was even worse. Lines of credit maxed out at $200,000. Back taxes owed of $85,000. Vendor debts of $120,000. Equipment loans of $75,000. The company Vincent bragged about at every party. The company that was supposedly thriving. It was drowning in nearly $500,000 of debt. Even the cars weren't real. All 3 were leased with balloon payments coming due. We didn't own anything. We just had very expensive monthly obligations. I sat in my kitchen at 3 a.m, surrounded by printouts, and did the math. Total debt, approximately $1.9 million. Total actual asset value, maybe $1.6 million. We were $300,000 in the hole, maybe more. But where had all the money gone? I kept digging. Over the following weeks, I traced every transaction I could find, and the picture that emerged was devastating. Cryptocurrency investments, $180,000, all lost. Gambling, $75,000, gone. An apartment I didn't know about, rented for a woman I didn't know about. $60,000 in rent and furnishings. Lifestyle expenses that never made it home. Watches, suits, trips I was never invited on. Another $85,000. My husband wasn't building an empire. He was building a house of cards with borrowed cards that were also on fire. We looked rich the same way a mannequin looks alive, convincing from a distance, completely hollow up close. My first instinct was to confront him, to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But I knew Vincent. I'd watched him operate for years. If I confronted him, he'd manipulate me. He'd explain it away, make me feel crazy for questioning him. He'd probably find a way to blame me for it. And worse, if he knew I knew, he might try to take control of my separate money, too. See, I'd always kept a little something of my own, my grandmother's voice in my head. A woman should have her own money, my IRA from my law firm years. I'd rolled it over when I quit, but never touched it. By then it had grown to about $180,000. That was mine, earned from my job. Separate property under the law. And then there was Grandma herself. She'd passed away when I was 28, and she'd left me $340,000. Her will was specific. This money is for Alexis alone. I'd kept it in a separate account for 6 years, never commingling it with Vincent's finances, never using it for household expenses. My grandmother kept her own account for 50 years. Not secret money, she'd always say, just mine. Smartest woman I ever knew. I had roughly $520,000 that was completely, legally, separately mine. So I didn't confront Vincent. Instead, I protected myself. I worked with my uncle, a retired accountant, to create an irrevocable trust for Tyler. My IRA and my inheritance went into that trust. My name wasn't on it as a beneficiary. Vincent's name certainly wasn't on it. It was for Tyler's future, college, a first home, emergencies. And it was untouchable. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage document, every hidden account, every suspicious transaction. I printed copies and kept them at my sister's house. I put copies in a safe deposit box. I saved everything on an encrypted drive. And then I waited. I knew Vincent would leave eventually. Men like him always do. They get bored, or they find someone younger, or they decide they deserve more. I just had to be ready when it happened. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of watching him dig the hole deeper. 3 years of smiling at dinner parties while knowing our entire life was built on quicksand. I got very good at patience and very good at pretending I didn't know my husband was financially drowning us both. When Vincent finally asked for the divorce, when he demanded the house, the cars, the business, everything, I almost laughed out loud. He wasn't asking for assets. He was demanding debt. He just didn't know it yet. Back in the present, I sat across from Nina Castellano and placed 3 binders on her desk. 3 years of evidence. Every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden account. She read in silence for almost an hour. When she finally looked up, her expression had completely transformed. "You've known about this for 3 years?" I was waiting for him to leave. I knew he would eventually. And when he demanded everything, he demanded all the debt. He just doesn't understand that yet. Nina leaned back in her chair. The pity was gone from her eyes. The concern was gone. What replaced it was something like awe. "So when you sign over the assets, I walk away clean. He gets the mortgages, the business debts, the lease obligations. All of it becomes his sole responsibility. And your inheritance, your retirement account, separate property, never commingled, legally protected, sitting safely in a trust for my son." Nina was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "Mrs. Dunst," she said, "I believe I owe you an apology. I thought you'd given up." I smiled back. "Everyone thinks that. That's kind of the point." Nina went from looking at me like a lost kitten to looking at me like a chess grandmaster. I prefer grandmaster, better outfit. The trap was already built, the numbers were verified, the documentation was airtight. All I had to do now was let Vincent think he was winning. And nobody does gracious loser better than a woman who's been practicing for 15 years. The next 3 months were a masterclass in acting. I became exactly what everyone expected me to be: broken, defeated, barely holding on. I showed up to mediation sessions with red eyes and trembling hands. I spoke softly, hesitantly, like a woman who'd lost all her confidence. I asked for so little that even the mediator seemed uncomfortable. "I just want enough to start over," I said during our second mediation. "I'm not trying to be difficult. I know the business is his life's work. I know the house means everything to him. I don't want to tear our family apart more than it already is. I requested a settlement of $50,000 cash, my personal belongings, shared custody of Tyler. That was it." Vincent agreed immediately. He was probably expecting me to fight for half of everything. That's what any reasonable lawyer would demand. Instead, I was asking for crumbs. He looked at me across that mediation table with something almost like pity. Like I was a wounded animal he was graciously putting out of its misery. I deserved an Oscar for that performance, or at least a Golden Globe. I was giving the role of a lifetime, and my only audience was my lying, cheating, soon-to-be bankrupt ex-husband. With each passing week, Vincent's arrogance grew. He stopped being careful, stopped pretending to be the reasonable one. He started telling everyone who would listen that I hadn't even fought. "She just gave up," he told his golf buddies. I offered her a fair settlement, and she took it without a word. Lorraine was even worse. She bragged at her book club, at her church group, at every social gathering she attended. "Vincent is keeping everything. That woman didn't get a dime." I always knew she wasn't strong enough for my son. To celebrate his upcoming victory, Vincent bought himself a new watch, $15,000. I know because I saw the charge on the business account. He was still using company money for personal expenses, still digging that hole deeper. He wore it to our next mediation session, making sure I noticed. He also took Brittany to dinner at La Maison, the French restaurant where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary. He posted photos on social media. "Life is good when you're with the right person," he wrote. The right person. He meant the person who didn't know about his debt. Yet. Meanwhile, Brittany had started redecorating my house. New furniture in the living room. New art on the walls. She even painted my kitchen. Gray. She painted it gray. I spent 3 weeks choosing that sage green. 3 weeks of paint samples and lighting tests and driving myself crazy trying to get the perfect shade. And she painted over it with builder-grade gray. Like it was nothing. Gray. Like her personality, like her future with Vincent once she found out he was broke. Very fitting, actually. Diane kept calling, fishing for information under the guise of friendship. I played along perfectly. "How are you holding up?" she'd ask, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I just want it to be over," I'd tell her, making my voice crack slightly. "I can't fight anymore, I don't have the energy." Within hours, Vincent would know. I could practically see him relaxing, letting his guard down even further. Diane thought she was playing me. She was actually just being a messenger service, not a very expensive one either. But while the adults were playing their games, Tyler was watching, and my son, my smart, observant, wonderful son, was starting to notice things that didn't add up. He noticed his dad's new $15,000 watch, but heard Vincent tell him they couldn't afford the school trip to Washington, D.C. He noticed Brittany's shopping bags piling up in the foyer, but heard Vincent complain about money being tight. He noticed the disconnect between the lifestyle his father was projecting and the excuses he kept making. One evening, Tyler came to my tiny apartment and sat down at my secondhand kitchen table. He looked at me with those serious eyes, so much like his father's, but with something Vincent had lost long ago. Honesty. "Mom," he said quietly, "is Dad actually rich?" I looked at my son for a long moment. "What do you think?" He was quiet, processing. "I think something's not right. I think he's pretending." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Trust me, just wait a little longer." My 15-year-old figured out something was wrong before 2 lawyers and a certified accountant did. I should bill his college fund for consulting fees. Behind the scenes, Nina was preparing our legal strategy with surgical precision. The main divorce agreement stated clearly that I was relinquishing all claims to marital property. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would go to Vincent. In exchange, I would receive my modest cash settlement and walk away. But attached to that agreement was an addendum, a detailed liability disclosure statement. Every debt, every mortgage, every loan, every obligation tied to those assets. When Vincent signed for all assets, he would be legally assuming all liabilities. The mortgages would become his sole responsibility. The business debts would transfer entirely to him. The lease obligations on the cars would be his problem alone. It was all there in black and white. Legal, Proper. Devastating. Legal documents are like poetry, Nina told me. Boring, expensive poetry that can ruin someone's life. My favorite kind. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Harold Whitfield, Vincent's lawyer, called Nina with concerns. My client is assuming significant assets, Harold said carefully. I'd like to request a full financial audit before we finalize, just to verify everything. Nina kept her voice neutral. Of course. We'll provide whatever documentation you need, but when Harold brought this to Vincent, my soon-to-be ex-husband shut it down immediately. No audits, Vincent told him. I built that company. I know exactly what it's worth. I'm not paying for some accountant to tell me what I already know. Harold pushed back. I strongly recommend we verify the asset values before you sign. This is a significant no. Vincent cut him off. Brittany wants this done. I want this done. No more delays. Harold had been practicing law for over 30 years. He knew when a client was about to make a mistake. He also knew he couldn't force someone to take his advice. He presented Vincent with a waiver, a document acknowledging that Harold had recommended an independent financial review and that Vincent was declining against counsel's advice. Vincent signed it without reading it, just like he'd sign everything else without reading it. Never underestimate the power of an impatient girlfriend to make a man skip the fine print. Brittany was worth millions to me, in legal strategy anyway. The night before the hearing, Vincent sent me a text message. Thank you for not making this ugly. I stared at that message for a long time. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of building his business, raising his son, managing his life. And he was thanking me for not making things difficult for him while he threw me away. I typed back, I just want what's best for Tyler. What was best for Tyler? His trust fund, his future secured, and a father who was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Nina called me that evening. Thursday at 9 a.m. Final hearing. Judge Patricia Holden. Are you ready? I looked around my small apartment. The secondhand furniture, the boxes still unpacked in the corner, the tiny kitchen I'd painted sage green because it reminded me of hope. I've been ready for 3 years. 3 years of waiting, and it was finally here. I felt like a kid on Christmas morning. If Christmas morning involved divorce court and financial revenge, Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Vincent would walk into that courtroom expecting to collect his prize. He had no idea he was about to inherit a financial avalanche, one he'd signed for himself, and the best part? He'd asked for it, in writing, with witnesses. If you've made it this far, you already know something satisfying is coming. Hit that like button if you're ready for Vincent to get what he deserves. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? I've got more stories where this came from. Trust me. Now let's finish this. Thursday, April 17th, 9 a.m., courtroom 4B. I remember every detail of that morning, the way the sunlight came through the tall windows, the smell of old wood and floor polish, the quiet murmur of lawyers shuffling papers. This was where 15 years of marriage would officially end, and where 3 years of patience would finally pay off. Vincent arrived first, of course. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal Armani I'd helped him pick out for a client dinner 3 years ago. His new watch caught the light as he shook hands with Harold. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man about to close a very favorable deal. Brittany was waiting in the hallway. She wasn't allowed in the courtroom, but she wanted to be there for moral support. I caught a glimpse of her through the door. Perfect makeup, designer bag, scrolling through her phone like this was just another boring appointment. Lorraine was there, too, sitting in the gallery. She dressed up for the occasion, probably planning to take Vincent to a celebratory lunch afterward. She looked at me when I walked in and gave me this little smile, the kind you give someone you've already beaten. I arrived a few minutes after Vincent. Simple navy dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back in a low bun. I looked tired, defeated, like a woman who had nothing left to fight for. Perfect. I looked like someone who'd given up on life and fashion simultaneously. Very convincing. I should really teach acting classes. Judge Patricia Holden entered, and everyone rose. She was in her early 60s, silver hair, reading glasses perched on her nose. 30 years on the family court bench. She'd seen every trick, every manipulation, every lie that divorcing couples could throw at each other. Nothing surprised her anymore. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up. Mercer versus Mercer. Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement? Harold stood first. Yes, Your Honor. My client, Vincent Mercer, is assuming all marital assets, including the family residence, the real estate development business, and all associated vehicles. In exchange, Mrs. Dunst receives a cash settlement of $50,000. Nina rose beside me. That's correct, Your Honor. My client agrees to relinquish all claims to these assets and accepts the proposed settlement terms. Judge Holden's eyes moved to me. She studied my face for a moment, looking for signs of coercion, I imagine, signs that I was being pressured into a bad deal. Mrs. Dunst, she said, I need to confirm that you understand what you're agreeing to today. You're giving up your claim to substantial property, the family home, the business you helped build. Are you certain this is what you want? I kept my voice soft, slightly unsteady. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. And you're entering this agreement voluntarily? No one is pressuring you? No, Your Honor. I looked down at my hands, then back up at her. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. I want this to be over. The judge studied me for another long moment. I could practically see her internal debate, whether to push harder, whether to order a continuance, whether to protect me from what looked like a terrible decision. But I was represented by counsel. I was answering clearly. I was an adult woman making my own choice. Very well, she said finally. Let's proceed. The clerk distributed the final documents, page after page of legal language, signatures required on every third page. Vincent signed eagerly, barely glancing at what he was agreeing to. He wanted this done. He wanted to get back to his new life with his new girlfriend and his new freedom. I signed slowly, deliberately. Every stroke of my pen was careful and precise. This was the moment I'd been waiting 3 years for. I was going to savor it. Across the courtroom, I saw Vincent glance at Lorraine and smile. She nodded back approvingly. In the hallway, his phone buzzed, probably Brittany sending encouragement. He checked his phone in court, during his own divorce hearing. That's the kind of man he was. Meanwhile, Harold Whitfield was doing what good lawyers do, reviewing the complete document package one final time. Main agreements signed, asset schedule signed, settlement terms signed. Then he reached the addendum, liability disclosure statement. I watched his face as he read, watched the confusion flicker across his features, watched him flip back a page, then forward again, like he was hoping he'd misread something. He hadn't. Harold's face went pale. He leaned toward Vincent, trying to be discreet. Sir, he whispered, we need to talk. Vincent waved him off, still basking in his victory. Not now. We're almost done. Sir Harold's voice was more urgent. You're assuming all debt. Vincent turned to look at him. What? The liability disclosure, Harold whispered, papers rustling as he pointed. The mortgages, the business liens. It's all here. You're assuming personal liability for everything. For the first time, Vincent actually looked at what he'd signed. I watched his eyes scan the numbers, watched the color drain from his face. House, $1.1 million owed. Market value, $850,000. Business, $480,000 in combined debts. Vehicles, $115,000 in lease obligations. Additional personal liabilities, $200,000. Total debt, approximately $1.9 million. Net value of everything he'd just claimed, negative $300,000. He hadn't won the lottery. He'd won the bill for it. Vincent stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This isn't right. He looked at me, then at the judge, then back at the papers. She hid this from me. This is fraud. Judge Holden's voice was sharp. Mr. Mercer, sit down. These numbers are fake, Vincent insisted, his voice rising. She manipulated the documents. This is Mr. Mercer. The judge's tone left no room for argument. Sit down. He sat, but his hands were shaking. His confident smile was gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like panic. Judge Holden looked at the documents in front of her, then at Vincent. Mr. Mercer, I'm looking at the liability disclosure statement attached to this agreement. These are debts associated with assets you are claiming, assets in your name, your business, your property. She fixed him with a hard stare. Are you telling this court that you don't know your own financial situation? Silence. Watching Vincent try to explain why he didn't know about his own debts was like watching a cat explain why there's a broken vase on the floor. Fascinating and completely unconvincing. Harold cleared his throat. Your Honor, I should note that I advised my client to conduct an independent financial review prior to this hearing. He declined. I have documentation. He produced the waiver, the one Vincent had signed without reading. The one that said, in clear legal language, that Harold had recommended a full audit, and Vincent had refused. Judge Holden reviewed it briefly, so Mr. Mercer was advised to verify these figures. He chose not to. He signed a waiver acknowledging that choice. She looked at Vincent. Is that correct? Vincent was staring at the waiver like it was a snake that had just bitten him. I thought, is that your signature, Mr. Mercer? A long pause. Yes. Then you assumed this risk voluntarily. Judge Holden's voice was matter of fact. You had the opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. The agreement stands. Vincent turned to me, desperation breaking through his composure. You knew. His voice cracked. You knew about all of this. I met his eyes calmly. I was your bookkeeper for 11 years, Vincent. I knew about everything. His face cycled through emotions faster than I could count. Confusion, rage, betrayal, fear. And finally, the one I'd been waiting for, realization, the understanding that he'd done this to himself. I want to withdraw the agreement, Vincent said, turning back to the judge. I didn't understand what I was signing. This isn't fair. Judge Holden shook her head. Mr. Mercer, you signed documents before this court stating you understood and agreed to all terms. You were represented by competent counsel. You declined additional review. Your wife did not hide anything. These are your debts, your mortgages, your obligations. She paused. The agreement is final. The gavel came down. Mrs. Dunst, you have your settlement. Mr. Mercer, you have the assets as agreed, along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is dissolved. I stood, smoothed my dress, picked up my purse. Then I looked at Vincent one last time. He was slumped in his chair, papers scattered in front of him, his whole world collapsing around him. You said you wanted everything except Tyler, I said quietly. I gave you exactly what you asked for. I walked out of that courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, I could hear Vincent's voice rising, yelling at Harold, demanding to know how this happened, threatening lawsuits. Harold's calm responses. I told you to get an audit. I have it in writing. You refused. Through the glass doors, I saw Brittany's face change as she listened, saw her look at Vincent, really look at him, and see something other than the successful businessman she'd thought she was getting. She was gone before I reached the elevator, moving fast, heels clicking on the marble floor, not looking back. Brittany's exit was faster than her entrance into my marriage. At least she was consistent. I stepped outside into the April sunshine. The sky was blue. The air was warm. Somewhere behind me, my ex-husband was screaming at his lawyer about fairness and fraud and how none of this was his fault. Ahead of me was a new life, smaller than before, simpler, but completely, entirely mine. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, Brittany had moved out of the house, packed her things in the middle of the night, left a note that said, "This isn't what I signed up for." The gray kitchen sat empty. Within a month, Vincent tried to sell the house. But when you owe more than something is worth, there are no buyers. Just banks calling about missed payments and realtors suggesting short sales. Within 2 months, the business started defaulting. Vendors filed lawsuits. The line of credit was frozen. The company that Vincent had spent 15 years building, the company I had spent 11 years supporting, was crumbling into dust. Within 3 months, Vincent was meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. The man who'd once bragged about his empire was now calculating which assets he could protect from creditors. The answer was almost nothing. Lorraine's perfect son was calling family members asking for loans, showing up at relatives' houses with excuses and explanations. Nobody knew about the debt. Alexis must have hidden it somehow. I was tricked. But the documents told a different story. The mortgages were in his name. The loans were in his name. The gambling debts, the crypto losses, the secret apartment, all his choices, all his signatures. I heard that Lorraine's Christmas newsletter that year was very short. Vincent is exploring new opportunities. Yes, opportunities in debt restructuring. The parallel conflicts resolve themselves with a kind of poetic symmetry. Diane called me about a week after the hearing. Her voice was shaking. I had no idea things were this bad. I'm so sorry, Alexis. I never meant for... I thought Vincent and I didn't answer, didn't respond, didn't give her the closure she was looking for. Some bridges aren't meant to be repaired. Some friendships don't deserve a second chance. 20 years of history betrayed for a wink and empty promises from a man who used everyone around him. She tried calling 3 more times. Then she stopped. I imagine she's still waiting for Vincent to notice her. She'll be waiting a long time. Lorraine tried a different approach, going through Tyler. Tell your mother I didn't know about the money problems. Tell her I'm sorry for how I treated her. Tell her I want to talk. Tyler looked at his grandmother, the woman who'd packed his mother's belongings in garbage bags, who'd called his mother worthless, who'd sided with his father without a single question, and said, Mom's busy building her life. She doesn't have time for excuses. Lorraine wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. Guess which one of us got what we wanted? Tyler, my wonderful, smart, observant son. He finally understood everything, not because I explained it, but because he figured it out himself. He saw the court documents. He heard his father's excuses. He watched Brittany leave, watched Lorraine scramble, watched the whole facade collapse. One evening, about a month after the divorce, he sat with me in my small apartment, the one with the sage green kitchen, the one with the secondhand furniture and the boxes finally unpacked. You waited 3 years, he said quietly. You knew this whole time and you just waited. I wanted to make sure you were protected, I told him. Whatever happened between your father and me, I needed to know you'd be okay. The trust fund, $520,000 safe and untouchable. He was quiet for a moment. Then he hugged me, really hugged me. The kind of hug I hadn't gotten from my 15-year-old son in months. The kind that said, I understand. The kind that said, I'm proud of you. 15-year-old boys don't usually hug their mothers voluntarily. I knew I'd done something right. My $50,000 settlement went toward getting established. First month's rent, security deposit, basic furniture that wasn't falling apart. It wasn't luxury, but it was stability. The trust fund stayed exactly where it was. Tyler's future, college, maybe a first home someday, a safety net that nobody could take from him. And me, I enrolled in interior design courses at the community college, the dream I'd put on hold when I was 23 to help Vincent build his empire. I was finally building my own. I started small. My first real client was a woman named Sandra, 52 years old, just ending a 28-year marriage. She was standing in her empty new apartment looking lost. When she asked me, how do you start over? I thought about it for a moment. One room at a time, one color at a time, one day at a time. We painted her kitchen sage green. She cried when she saw it. Happy tears, she said. The color of new beginnings. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Vincent showed up at my apartment. I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight. Not the healthy kind. Dark circles under his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. His watch was gone. He looked like a man who'd been through a war and lost. He stood in my doorway, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I didn't know it was this bad, he said. His voice was hoarse. I made mistakes. I know that now. But I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I leaned against my doorframe and looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd loved for almost half my life. This man who'd thrown me away like garbage. This man who was now drowning in the consequences of his own choices. Can we talk? He asked. Maybe we can figure something out. I don't know. Maybe we could. He couldn't even finish the sentence. Couldn't bring himself to ask for what he actually wanted. Help. My help. After everything. You asked for everything except Tyler, I said calmly. You got exactly what you wanted. Alexis, please. Goodbye, Vincent. I closed the door. He stood in the hallway for 10 minutes. I know because I watched through the peephole while eating ice cream. Best show I'd ever seen. 5 stars. Would watch again. That evening, after Tyler went to bed, I sat in my small living room and looked at my grandmother's photo on the shelf. The recipe box was next to it. The one thing Lorraine had almost taken. The one thing that mattered most. You were right about everything, Grandma, I said quietly. Keep your own money. Know your worth. And never let anyone make you feel small. The apartment was quiet, small. Nothing like the house I'd lived in for 15 years, but it was mine. Every paint color, every piece of furniture, every decision, mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was free. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next story.